be a chipping of the population, and so that you can't get money. They've gotten rid of the marrow, and they're destroying that. But that basically what's coming is a chip that allows you to be solvent financially, and otherwise you can't play.
Didn't he say that he had told you that he was actually the designer of that chip?
Yes, he designed it originally for show animals, and then they picked up the design and I guess worked from there. And then I talked to Jake Simpson, and he said that there's no need to use a physical chip anymore, that all they have to do is use some kind of nanotechnology that can be embedded in some lotion that you use on your hands, or wash your hands with soap, or whatever it is. It gets under your skin and it can create whatever they want. And there was also some mention of using ultraviolet. If I understood, it'll be picked up by ultraviolet light or something, and that they can embed all sorts of things in you using nanotech and lasers and so on. So this is contradictory testimony, and we at Camelot do get this. Like I'm saying, Dan Burish says the dollar will never crash. This is interesting. I mean, I really asked him about this. According to the timeline, that's not going to happen. Now, it's important to keep in mind also that Dan Burish is working with what used to be called Majestic, which is a much larger organization than it used to be. It's also run by a different group, apparently. But Dan is still associated, although he's so-called retired. They keep calling him back. And Marcia McDowell, his partner, is also involved. And by the way, they are married. I don't know if anyone out there knows that, but I attended their wedding reception just recently in Vegas, which is wonderful. They're actually stellar people, and they're good friends of ours. But I will say that it's important. I just want to say that it's important for people to realize is that as part of Majestic, they're fighting for America to stay, alive and afloat against an Illuminati, basically an agenda that is planning to have America go under. So there are different factions that are actually at war. So when Dan says that, what they've seen in the timeline may indeed be what they want to see, depending on what device they use. And that's a whole nother discussion about whether they use what's called the yellow cube or whether they use looking glass. And technically they wouldn't be using looking glass, which is a much more expert technology, again, alien-based technology, reversed from cylinder seals, as we understand it. We have a whole interview with Dan Burish on this subject on our website, so I encourage you to listen to that. It's called Stargates, I believe. So we are going to break, and we're going to be joined by Richard Sauder, and Richard will be very up on all of this information anyway, so it'll be great to have him here.
I'm sick and tired of hearing things from uptight, short-sighted, narrow-minded, hypocritical.
Well, hello everybody, you're listening to Bill Ryan and Kerry Cassidy, and this is Whistleblower Radio, and I love to say that because that sounds...
That's great.
Sounds like a lot of fun. In just a
that
moment,
was very smooth. Very smooth.
Was it really? Oh,
yeah.
I haven't even been practicing. Just you wait until you're really professional. I actually think a lot of people are listening to us hoping that we're going to be so amateurish we're just going to stumble around and be good for a laugh, which we probably will continue to do for quite a long time. But in the meantime, as usual, we've got more to talk about than we have time, and it's interesting stuff. We're just about to welcome Dr. Richard Sauder onto our show. I just wanted to make a comment before we get swept down the rapids to the next topic of discussion about the timeline thing, and I think you used the word that it was a kind of contradiction, and I wouldn't say that. I would say that there's no contradiction between an awareness of current intentions of what the controllers in present time would like to do, let's say, in the next 6 to 12 months, and what a small group of people are actually looking at in terms of quantum probabilities and some kind of future viewing portal device, which is still not looking at a fixed future, but is just looking at probabilities. And we know from the whole timeline 1 variant 83 thing that there are a large number of variants on any timeline, and is constantly changing kaleidoscopically. So if Dan... understands that there is a probability greater than any other probability that the dollar will not crash, and he's looking into the future, into this quantum field of possible timelines. That's not necessarily contradicting what people are trying to do now, and what people are telling us now that they're trying to do now. We just have to watch it all play out. It
is contradicting the fact that people are saying, and we certainly have a variety of witnesses saying, I literally have witnesses saying to me, the dollar is going to crash. So Dan is saying it's not. At some point, push does come to shove. But I think that's a very good explanation.
What I'm saying is that
what we're talking about here.
I'm saying that epistemologically it's different kinds of information. Somebody who says the dollar is going to crash on a particular day in 6 months' time, they're just talking about a current plan. They're not looking over the horizon into the future to see what will happen.
That's right.
In terms of probabilities. You talk about information of different kinds coming from different sources, and there's no contradiction here. What we don't know is what is going to happen because the future isn't set. And that's what makes it all fun.
We have to say that Looking Glass and or the yellow cube has been wrong. They also said Hillary was going to be president, and she isn't. So we're clearly, and this is important because what it means is that we, the people, are taking control of what's going on down here, and in a much more conscious way. And as we do so, we change all the timelines.
That's exactly correct. You're only ever looking at probabilities. Probabilities and possibilities, and that's what free will is all about. Now, I do have a wonderful underground-based story to tell, actually, but rather than keep our guest Richard Sauder on the end of a hook, I'd love to welcome him to our show. Richard, are you there?
Yes, thank you, Bill and Carrie. I am, and I want to say at the outset, if your engineers could possibly increase the level of the volume of the audio coming to me through the telephone, I could hear you much better. As it is now, I can barely hear you. You're way down at the end of a pipe miles away. So I'm really straining to hear what you're saying. But thank you. And I want to say that I missed most of your conversation about the economy, and I gather you're talking about a projected possible upcoming death of the dollar. In that regard, I just saw today a recent bulletin from Global Europe Anticipation, the so-called LEAP bulletins that come out from time to time. And in their latest one, they in fact are saying that the United States and the UK will both default on their debt by summer's end. Now, I imagine that if and or when that happens, and that would be barely, 2, 3, 4 months from now, that the shockwaves from that will travel around the world and rapidly, and will have a major impact on the global economy. In that regard, I'm sure that you and perhaps many people listening would be aware of the prognostications of the reports that come out of Half Past Human under the direction of Cliff High, which are very much anticipating a collapse of the dollar of some sort later this year, ongoing into 2010, 2011, such that by half a year from now, or at the most 18 months from now, we will be living on a vastly different world in terms of the economic, social, and political landscape. So I don't doubt that these things are entirely possible. In that regard, Carrie and I exchanged a few emails recently about this mysterious $134.5 billion dollars worth of U.S. bearer bonds that were caught by Italian border guards in the possession of a couple of ostensible Japanese, or at least these unidentified men were carrying Japanese passports, and they were trying to pass into Switzerland, by implication, wanting to either fence these bonds or move them to a safer haven, I guess. And I found that interesting because just several weeks ago, there was a report in the financial press that there were $134.5 billion remaining unspent